In this video today we are going to make this hell of a steak and also this hell of a blade. Before I could start building the knife, I wanted to make a template. I have already spoken about templates in my previous videos, so I wanted to show you the process. I start by cutting out my drawing. Pro tip, you can also reprint your drawing if you want to keep your design on paper. After I cut the paper template, the spray adhesives comes into play. Another pro tip, put something underneath what you're spraying. This stuff is nasty and sticky. I then stick it onto the material. In my case, I'm using a micarta, but you can use any material that you want to use that holds up nicely. Now that the glue is dry, I start by cutting out the template on my bandsaw and shape it with my belt grinder. I wish cutting out steel would be as fast as grinding micarta to shape. Templates can help you out quite a lot, and they give you a repeated end product without using a water jet or a laser. Especially in the beginning when you're not sure about a design, how it feels, just cut out a template, see if it feels good, and then start with the steel. Personally, I would recommend to clamp down the templates, otherwise they skate around on a steel and you won't get nice and clean lines to work with. I've got now some ABL steel which I covered in blue Dicam. That helps me to see the lines that I'm scribing, and it's easier to see when you're grinding. And now it is the same procedure as cutting out the micarta. It just takes a bit longer than grinding the micarta, but my 10-inch contact wheel and a used 36 grit belt makes short process out of it. When I profile my knives with the contact wheel, I always clean up the grind on my flat platen. That gives me a 90-degree corner and I can make some final adjustments. Now that the shape is done, I can start drilling out the pinholes, which I couldn't drill after the knife is hardened because I'm going right into the heat treatment now. Normally I do a preheat treatment grind on my knives, but ABL likes to warp, especially in the length of an 8-inch chef's knife. Therefore, I heat treat it before I do any kind of grinding on it. The plate quench draws out the heat super fast and it keeps the knife from bending like a banana. For these chef knives, I wanted to try something out, and I want to try my best to get a really nice belt grounded finish. Usually I hand sand all my chef knives. A good and clean belt ground finish also fascinates me, especially on a chef knife. ABL can be ground super thin. It has a clean and fine grain structure, but there is a big but. You have to be super careful while you're grinding. You don't want to overheat your blade by any means possible, and always cool down your knives. Even slightly higher temperature that wouldn't ruin your temper can lead to warps in the blade. I had that happen to me when I started out. I was grinding along and everything was nice and straight, and in the middle of the process the knife bent on one side. What would really help is a mist system that you can get for your belt grinder. I really gotta get one of these. Downside is you kinda get wet when you're grinding. For now I'm sticking with fresh belts and a full bucket of water to keep the knife as cool as possible. Because I want to rock pattern, I thought about giving the chef knives a two-tone finish. That means everything that is ground with rock pattern will get a darker finish, and the bevels will be reground after the edge to be polished. Rock pattern without a dark finish is, in my opinion, lame and it doesn't look really good. The chef knives are now ground and ready for the handle that needs some profiling and drilling before I can start with the handle work itself. You have seen me do this quite often now, so I wanted to take a chance to talk about how I actually started knife making. When I was a small young Chris without back problems and a monster addiction, I loved watching Lord of the Rings. My little me was curious on how they built these amazing and beautiful swords, so I started with watching the behind the scenes footage. What I've seen there was my dream, making swords and knives, but there are no real apprenticeships that you can get nowadays. Maybe a few here and there, so I proceeded with my life, but it was stuck in my memories. I grew up and started working in a kitchen and helped out there, cleaning the dishes, making desserts and salads. I was interested in cooking and I started to pick up more and more until I finally worked my way up to a sous chef. I always disliked certain things on commercial chef knives. Useless bolster transitions and sharp edges and corners. While I was working, I watched more and more sword content on YouTube, and the algorithm showed me Alex Steel and Simple Little Lives, and that brought me into a huge rabbit hole of the knife making world. One day I decided to make my first knife, and then I was hooked, and there was no path backwards. The handle is now done and I'm now darkening the blade, But as I said before, I want to have a two-tone finish, so I got to repolish the bevels. And there you go, guys, the chef knives are now done, and it is time for Chefworks to steal the show. A chef knife today. I also want to cook a really nice steak. So I started by salting the steak, and I'm putting it into a vacuum bag because I want to sous vide the steak. And sous vide is a really nice cooking method. You're putting the steak in a vacuum sealed bag into a water bath with the perfect temperature, and then afterwards you're taking it out, letting it cooling down just a little bit, and then you're going to fry the surface of the steak, and you will have the perfect color in the end. So my setup for frying the steak is actually pretty simple because I don't want to just throw it into the forge. So here's the setup. I've got this grilling roast right here, and I've got this bar of steel that I'm going to heat up in my forge, and then I can place it on this fire resistant brick, and then I've got this layer in between, and then I can fry the steak. I'm going to now start lighting the forge with some fire. So as you can see, the workshop is quite smoky. You can see it in the background. Let's just hope the steak is good. So the steak is a little bit burned, but let's see how it is inside. A little bit too done, but I think this is still good. So guys, what are we learning from a project like this? Maybe you shouldn't cook a steak in your forge because your whole workshop smells like steak. Actually kind of a good thing. The steak still tastes good, but I would rather do it on a really nice barbecue. But the knife cuts like a champ, and the steak still tastes nice. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope if you want to see more content like that, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll see us in the next one.